Today's episode of Drop the Check is brought to you by Pearson Meyer Wines. You know, we live in an age where everything we do is based upon reviews and ratings. So if you've never had a Pearson Meyer wine before, go check out those ratings. If you have had a Pearson Meyer wine before, you don't need to. You already know. Pearson Meyer, P-E-I-R-S-O-N-M-E-Y-E-R. Pearson Meyer, a very, very good wine.
How are you, Mike Anderson?
Man, I am just so wonderful.
What,
Even better now that I'm here with you.
Well,
Robbie
me
Meyer.
too. I'm glad we got to plan it out because I know that I had originally said maybe we could get together on Thursday, but you're doing NFL draft night.
Draft night, NFL. Big,
You know,
big night.
I foolishly thought it was this weekend, and maybe it continues on for a couple of days, right? But first round is tomorrow night.
First round of our NFL draft is tomorrow night.
And you know what we're super excited about here in Napa, California?
Yes, we are. And, you know, this player, which I believe that we're talking about. Well, by the way,
Yeah.
it's this same guy from Napa, real kind of popular out here in the metro Atlanta, let's call it Athens area as well,
Brock Bowers.
is a tight end by the name of Brock Bowers.
And I haven't seen it lately. He was projected as high as 5 at one point. Now they're going quarterback crazy, so we'll see how that turns out. But
Crazy.
we're proud of the kid no matter what. I'm proud of him for University of Georgia, but everyone here is proud of him because he's Napa, and we don't have so many first-round draft picks coming out of Napa Valley.
Yeah, he may be, you know, the folks that take, okay, we're going to pick the best player in the draft.
Yeah.
You know, obviously we have a lot of teams that are really in need of a quarterback.
Yeah.
So it's going to be, but if we were just to stick on best player in the draft, Brock Bowers could be picked up.
I would agree, and I was going to say if it was my favorite player. You know who has a hard time drafting is the Atlanta Falcons.
The Atlanta Falcons, Robbie, you could have just stopped with who has a hard time.
Yes, they do have a hard time. You know, I don't know if you ever listened to Buck Belue's show there in Atlanta. Do you ever listen to that?
No, I don't, but I know who Buck Belue is.
Yeah, and you know, he basically talks Georgia and then Hawks. He'll mention the Hawks, but Braves and Falcons, and he wants to love the Falcons, but God, he just all their mess ups. It's pretty funny though. I like Buck Belue a lot.
You know what that sounds like? That sounds like a Falcon fan.
Yeah.
All that, the way that you said, we want to love the Falcons. We want, you know, it's a lot of Atlanta teams are just this way. You want to love them, but I liken the Falcons to that cousin that comes every Thanksgiving, right? You want to give him a chance, and you're like, Benji's here again, and hey, Benji, I want to love him. He's my cousin. Bam, he kicks you in the nuts.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So here comes the next year again. You're very leery of, Benji showing up for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And he seems like he's going to be great this year, right?
Yeah.
Starts off really good. Appetizers, whatever. He's cheesy, he's helpful, or whatever. You're like enthusiastic. You're like, this is going to be a great Thanksgiving. Benji's here. He's doing well. Bam! He kicks you in the nuts, right? That's the Falcons. Thanksgiving after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, no, I know. But, you know, there's always next year.
That's right.
And talking about getting kicked in the nuts with them making it all the way to the Super Bowl and losing that lead. And
yeah, well,
I still can't talk about it.
In fact, I don't even want to mention it right now. So I'd rather even mention awesome, exciting things that we have going on today.
Well, exactly, and Thanksgiving was my good segue because our guest today is one of my dearest, oldest friends from California. We met out here, but he spent many a Thanksgiving with us and my big Thanksgiving celebrations. You know, that just actually brings to mind because I don't think you never made it to one of my Thanksgivings, did you?
I never did, although I hear about them.
Yeah.
I hear all the tales of what a Robbie Meyer Thanksgiving is all about. I just have never experienced it myself.
That's okay. We'll make that happen. So Andrew Levi, he's going to be joining us today, and coincidentally enough, not coincidentally, I don't know what the right word would be, but interestingly enough, he and I have talked on the phone a trillion times and text almost daily, it seems like, kind of like you and I might do. And he drew it to my attention. This is the first time we've seen each other in person in like 13 years or 11 years or 9.
Okay.
I mean, it's pretty amazing.
That's great. Let's hope that he's not like, cousin Benji that shows up and 13 years later kicks you in the middle of the nuts in the middle of the podcast. Well, without further ado, what do you say?
Let's do it.
Welcome to Drop the Check. Today's guest could be called a philosopher or a wine scholar or a director of Band of Angels or simply a really good guy. Let's give a warm welcome to Band of Angels' own Andrew Levi.
Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you. Good to be here. RTM.
Yes, sir. In the house.
Real.
Well, I was mentioning the Elijah thing, which was relevant because I was fortunate enough to go to Andrew's brother's house and celebrate Passover with the whole crew, your brother's family, and then some extra friends. Have you done a Seder dinner before, Mike?
I have. By the way, and it's been many
Simon,
years.
I'm sure.
I have.
Yeah.
Okay. What's our what do we say, Andrew, for Passover right now?
What do we say for it? Did you see me lean over to my brother at one point and ask him if he and Ruth like to hide the afikomen?
I didn't.
Do you know what that is, Mike? It's the piece of matzah you hide for the kids.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's stupid Jewish humor.
Yeah. Yes.
I thought you were going to ask him to say the prayer for the wine.
Beret Pri Hagafen.
Beret Pri Hagafen.
There it is.
All right.
And there's wine. Hey, happy Passover.
Happy Passover. Mike, have we met? It seems inevitable that we probably did, but I have no for real recollection, or I'm not sure. I mean, could be.
Well, you know what? Could be. I think could be is pretty safe to say. The places that we may have met, which we discussed a little bit, was a Thanksgiving, but I have not been privy to one of the Robbie Meyer Thanksgiving celebrations.
But you've met at Thanksgiving probably Lee Whitworth.
Probably.
I think, okay. Who's a good friend of mine. That's how actually Mike and I met. And then, who did I just say? Not Chucky, but
Brett Chapman.
Chappie. I think you met him before.
That sounds familiar. You know, I was at T1.
Yeah. We started T1.
We started T1. Thanksgiving 1.
Wow.
Yeah.
You might like your founding member.
Yeah. It was at our house. We lived together closer to Calistoga. It's a Calistoga address, but in between St. Helena and Calistoga, in a questionable house that had a tarp for a roof.
Part tent.
And then the toilet did not adhere to the ground. Okay. It was just like mobile.
It's always great when you have a bunch of people over for Thanksgiving.
The funny thing is when we moved in, it was pretty wooded out in front. And then we come home one day and the property owner had just chopped down all the trees.
And left them there.
In a big moat that I figured was a fire moat in case the Huns attacked. But all of a sudden, we had $1 million view, a multi-million-dollar view.
Okay.
It was unreal. We lived in this, dump. I mean, it was probably, I'm not sure the county would have signed off on it.
No, it was probably illegal.
But we had this view looking over at, I guess it would have been Hell Mountain.
Well, in Three Palms Vineyard.
Yeah. It was unreal. I mean, we were penthouse paupers.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Those are the good old days. I mean, I was kind of alluding to a little bit before to Mike, but so you and I first met, now I'm going to try to pick the year. Was it 97, 98?
96, 97, I'm going to say.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
And that was at UC Davis.
Yep.
Okay.
And, we've had Matt Rourke on the podcast before, too. And so we all met around the same time. And, it was that kind of funny experience of it was a whole new life for us. You're from?
Originally?
Yeah.
Kansas City.
Kansas City.
Okay, as I
Missouri,
see.
not to be confused with Kansas City, Kansas.
That's right.
Those
Right.
are two different municipalities.
Yes.
The MO.
So, and I'm coming from Atlanta, and Rourke's coming from Southern California, and Elizabeth's coming from New York, and, we're just kind of, I don't know what was your thought? I told the story before with Rourke, how, I think when I showed up at Davis, I expected like tweed jackets and elbow patches,
right.
and, people walking around with the what's the old sommelier like cup?
Oh, the Tostavin?
Yeah.
Is that what it's called?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then Rourke shows up all tattooed.
Oh,
out
yeah.
and whatever else.
Cargo shorts.
What were you expecting?
I had lived and worked for a few years in the California wine industry.
Mm-hmm.
So it was basically what I did expect. What I wasn't surprised is to see that the average age, even of the undergrads in that department, were upper 20s.
Yeah.
I mean, there were, we had a Vangie in our class.
Yeah.
And so when you're a Vangie, you're 18 and you want to be a winemaker.
Right.
But the rest of us were sort of born again students, people who had started out doing something else, discovered wine, and said, screw whatever else I was doing. This is it.
I'll qualify that, though, because I think that was true for the Americans. But we had lots of international students who they were their families. You remember all the Greeks?
Oh, my God, those guys.
What were their names? Can you think?
Papadopoulos.
But
That's my dermatologist, by the way. I have a Papadopoulos, Greek Papadopoulos. I guess they're all Greek Papadopoulos.
Yeah.
That is a dermatology family here. They might be the same ones.
Not to be confused with the Dickensheets dynasty.
Exactly. Different dynasty there.
That sounds like a racket, Mike. They're embezzling money. They're popping pimples
That's right.
for extra change in the back alleys.
So we did the Davis thing and it turned out to be a lot of fun. I think at first my point about like what did you expect, and it was kind of like going to like kindergarten for the first time. No one knew each other. There weren't connections, and so we all kind of like slowly started to get to know each other. And probably with like some of the first parties did we actually become friends. Before that, it was like I think everyone was a little guarded, like we were supposed to be a certain way. And then fortunately, it's wine college, so the wine starts flowing, and then we ended up all becoming very, very close, good friends. And then we lived separate in different houses in Davis, but then we had to get the fuck out of Davis and moved up to Calistoga and decided we'd be a good fit to live together up there. So that was that origin story and how we got to know each other. And it was pretty cool kind of like coming of age time of that. And start working away. And so I know you were at Trefethen.
Yep.
Give me
I
your
volunteered with Elizabeth Viana at Trefethen. We were both. Did I say volunteer?
Paid,
interns.
Yeah. Interns.
Yeah. It felt like volunteering. Yeah, that's about what the pay was.
I thought you were making a joke. Yeah, I know. It's what these days. We pay pretty well for the interns because there's just no way you can live out here making $10 an hour.
No, it goes back to our story about that kind of house we lived in. It's
exactly.
ridiculous.
Do you remember what our rent was?
I have no recollection of that.
$700 or $600. We paid $350 a person.
Yeah,
but it was like don't ask, don't tell.
Yeah.
Like if something broke, they're just like, suck it up.
Gotta live with it.
Yeah, and comparatively now that house has been redone, the rent could easily be $4,000 a month.
Oh, I'm sure.
But anyway, but before Trefethen,
before Trefethen, my story long story short, I was 2 years into a philosophy degree on the East Coast and needed to take a semester off, was kind of drifting a little bit.
You're at hippie school.
I was at a total hippie school.
Very liberal arts.
Hampshire College.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here, back up. Stay on that for just a second, Andrew. So you're from Kansas City.
Born and raised
in Kansas City. And then you go to school, you go off to college on the East Coast for philosophy.
Yeah. Did I know I wanted to study philosophy?
Sure.
Kinda. I think so. I mean, I liked the idea of it.
He's very much a intellect, philosophical person. So to me, that fits right in.
Quite honestly, I'll say this, Andrew. I think quite honestly, a lot of people, a lot of students, maybe they should start out with a philosophy degree. Because what the hell do you really know that you're really trying to get into? As some of us, I know Robbie and I both know now with first year students in college about picking that quote unquote career that you're going to do, right? You'd rather go and throw some paint on a wall and be this for a little while, because more than likely that shit ain't going to stick, right? And just being in college is going to be where you figure out what you're doing. Hence, Andrew is in what college again?
Hampshire.
Okay.
Hampshire.
But you know what, Mike, you spoke more wisdom than you realize, because I think where we're going with this is exactly what you say. And, kind of like, so when we're at Davis, we're approximately 25 years old, something like that. And now we're 53 years old. And so, and Mike, you and I have talked about this, where I find myself in the wine industry is something entirely different than what I imagined back in that time. And, so many of our fellow students and colleagues, worked in the industry. And I've told this before on the podcast, you remember the one of our classmates, and we finished final exams, and I was like, so where are you going to? And he's like, I'm going to be a pilot for Delta or Eastern or something like that. Do you remember that guy? He had the big mustache.
Yeah.
And so he went through this whole program to be a winemaker and it's like someone who goes to medical school and never practices medicine, So, but, certainly over time, people, I think, got a little bit older and, what's this industry that I decided to do 10 years ago or whatever? It's not really, the thing. So we'll get to that. But first, I wanted to go back to that question. So prior to Trefethen, you said.
So I moved out to California, taking a semester off, knowing I needed to because, the philosophy thing, but was really into the party about college. And
was party side of college.
Was really into the party. Yeah. And took a semester off. It just wasn't sustainable at that point. And didn't want to go home, didn't want to go back to Kansas City. I think there's a time in every young person's life when you don't want to be there. And or at least for me. And so my aunt, my mom's sister, happens to live in Calistoga, Napa Valley. And she said, well, why don't you come out here? And so I did. And I didn't know anything about wine. I thought wine was passing around a jug of Carlo Rossi in the dorm room, passing around something else,
Sure.
And I got a job at a winery. What else do you do? I got a job at Sterling Vineyards. And I just felt ass over tea kettle in love with it and had a priori knowledge in it. I mean, all I needed to do was be in a serious place, in a serious situation, and I could smell what they said I might smell. And I was even furthering the conversation on day one. It was one of those remarkable moments in life where you're just like, I don't know where this is coming from.
Sure.
And I lost my arm.
Yeah.
As long as you can hear me.
No, we can hear you, but is it back now?
No.
I picked up Mando, our mascot.
All right, no worries. I'll keep going. So, in pretty short course, decided I wanted to go to Davis. But I had a girlfriend at the time who was also at Hampshire. She moved out with me. Napa Valley wasn't the place to be for two young people who still liked the party. So we moved to Santa Cruz, California. And that's a place where the party exists. And worked at wineries down there, very small, funky mountain wineries. Way too loud now. Sorry, Robbie. Yeah. Okay. A little lower. Okay, then. Even lower. Even lower. Even a little higher.
A little higher.
All right, that's perfect.
Technical difficulties here.
And listen, in any case, I'll make it short. I knew I wanted to go to Davis even when I was at Sterling, and I knew that I wanted to be a winemaker, that's the part of the industry that I wanted to be in. So within a year and a half, I did get myself to Davis. and that picks up where Robbie left off.
Yeah. So it was Sterling, and then we go to Davis, and then you get an internship at Trefethen.
Yes.
And then
my first, out of Davis, my first job. Yeah, my level's real loud right now. It's okay. That'll work. Was at Ferrari Carano. The winery itself is in Dry Creek Valley, very pretty valley. And worked for the worst winemaker in the history of California winemaking.
Geez.
Oh gosh, can we say? I mean, do you say names something like
No.
this?
Do
No,
I
you
say
don't.
names? I guess I don't. I got to
can't.
see. The thing is I don't have any skin in the game anymore. I'd love to name names, but I can't. I mean, Robbie, my brother here is still in the business.
Yeah.
I got it. But let's just say that he wouldn't have even made a good intern. This douchebag was the head winemaker. You can look it up. I started in 1999.
We're going to get canceled. So you were at Trefethen Ferrari Carano for a while.
Carano for a while, 5 years, climbed the ladder, enologist to assistant winemaker to associate winemaker, and left finally as a winemaker for a brand new winery called Skipstone, which was in the Alexander Valley, and was my dream job. And I knew it was my dream job, not just the first time I saw the property and heard about the project, but it was the dream job in my mind's eye all along.
Okay.
And maybe more profound in saying that, in your mind's eye, because that goes back to what I was saying, like what our suppositions were about whether it was Davis or what a winery was like or working in the industry. And I had whatever suppositions I had, my brain are nothing like what it is now in reality. So would you agree with that, Andrew? Like you that was your supposed dream job.
Well, did it turn out to be in the long run? When you set yourself up for that kind of thing, it never does. I mean, how can it? So, it fit the idea that I had. 30-acre vineyard, tiny production, handcrafted, good vineyard, up in the mountains. There was a magnetism to that place. When I went there, there's just some places that feel good. And that was a vineyard in a spot off on its own. No direct vineyard neighbors, an isolated vineyard, and it just felt really good to be up there. And just refused to lose. Wasn't going to not get the job. Got the job and was there for 5 years. And, that's a long story too, but we can get into that as much or little as we want.
But at some point, I mean, while and that's kind of what I'm speaking to. Again, like so since you opened up Pandora's box about wineries or whatever, and I by no means would badmouth Peter Michael Winery. It's one of the best wineries in California. I mean, they're world class, very well financed, very beautiful as well. But it wasn't for me. That wasn't where I was going to thrive and grow and love. And so, I transitioned out of there. And while Skipstone was gorgeous and well financed and good wine, and you're making good wine and all of that kind of good stuff, maybe your heart wasn't really into it. Now, because at this point, like I said, so now you're not 25 anymore. You're what, 33?
30, yeah, right around there. Yeah, that sounds about right. And yeah, I mean, I guess when I took the job there, I was 34, maybe.
Okay.
When I left, I was 39.
Okay, yeah. So now you're 39.
I don't know how much or little to share. While I was at Skipstone, things kind of started to fall apart. And I mean that in many different ways. The industry, how can I put this? Let me take a step back.
Yeah. I think I know where you're going, but yeah, go ahead.
I've always been a dreamer, and it's something that's been a problem for me. And as I've gotten older, I've learned to reel back a little bit from that and live life on its own terms.
Hang on. Why a problem?
I would make decisions about an experience before even starting the experience.
Would it be fair to say idyllic? Like you had some preconceived idea that this is the way it's supposed to be?
Yes, very much so. Very much so. And, I've always been a romantic.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to put it too. And I mean, the wine industry, when I discovered wine way back when I was at Sterling, I fell so deeply in love with it that a lot of what I fell in love with was the history and the lore of it. And I fancied myself some, this is going to sound ridiculous, but I was very young then. I was 21 then, but kind of fancied myself a, winemaker philosopher type,
Which I think you are. One of the most earnest people I've ever met in my life. And I can think of, I'll make up a quote. I don't think of any particular thing, but I could say we're living in Calistoga and, we're cooking dinner or whatever and having a glass of wine. And you would be so earnest and sincere. It's like, Robbie, we're making wine. It was very profound. And your heart was so big for it because I think of what you imagined it to be. And quite frankly, what, maybe some of our listeners out there who are into wine, who are not in the industry, that's what they kind of think it's like.
Yes. I bought into what I bought in very heavily and wouldn't let go of the idea that the guy who's, in love with wine in Des Moines thinks of it. That every single day, that every single day as a winemaker, you're in a candlelit cellar with a beret on your head.
Yeah. Yeah. The taste of it.
Yeah. That never happened. Let me say this though, because I think this is going to come up a little later. I've been over the course of the past year. It's been a remarkable year for me. Are you about our age, Mike?
Yeah.
I suppose so.
Yeah.
Do I? Yes.
Okay.
I'm older or younger, about the same age.
Well,
yes.
You're 53 too?
I'm 53.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I'm about that age too.
All right. Well, we're all in midlife. We're all in midlife.
Yeah.
And,
I hope so.
Yeah, exactly. And I've been thinking a lot about identity in the past year and how you find identity. Now let me go back to working at Sterling and being 21 and falling completely in love with wine and romanticizing it and falling in love with an idea. By the time I was 22, maybe 23, I had constructed, I had built, I had been the architect of and constructed an identity for myself.
Sure.
With wine in the middle of it, about wine, an identity about wine. I had built an identity. I had constructed an identity. And I crammed myself into that identity. I crammed myself in there. And some parts fit perfect. Other parts were I could wear. And, other parts didn't fit at all. But it was the identity that I had built, that I romanticized, that I needed within wine. And I carried myself inside that constructed identity for decades.
Right.
And I kind of just want to leave that there because I think we're going to revisit it soon.
Yeah.
Okay, I got something to say about that. I don't feel that in my opinion, because yes, we are all about the same age, and some of the things that you're sharing right now, I am also feeling in my own life, obviously not taking the path of being a winemaker, as I am watching my child that is in college right now, entering her college at an art school and having this idyllic type of fantasy where she sees the paths that she sees in front of her are going to lead into the story that she has written for herself to be that way. Now I, just as you stated, am on the other side of it, and I start to have these feelings of my own parents telling me these things that I could go to tell her right now to be, don't worry about that. Just go through with whatever you're doing right now. Be in first year of art school or philosophy school, right? In your first year, because most of what you're going to learn is just being there and living right now. So you said that something about you worded it differently. I went into this, it was a fucking travesty because it didn't fit the narrative that you had written for yourself. I'm starting to feel more and more, even to the point of almost mystical or fate, that those things are not such travesties. They feel like them in the moment, because they're painful and hard. But what they're leading you to is the next learning. You don't know that when you're in it because it's harder than hell, right? It's not supposed to be this way.
Yeah.
But it turns you this way, and like, what would it have been any other way? You don't know, because you're only the whole be here now. It was cliche to me for so many years. It's starting to ring true finally at this stage of my life.
Your noble age of that.
Right?
No,
it's be here now.
Yeah, it's again that this we, especially those with artistic endeavors and artistic desires, or whatever. We set ourselves up for. Well, the shortcut is we set ourselves up for disappointment because it's like, I spend so much of my day doing spreadsheets and doing, I was talking to Andrew about, budgeting and it's not about, like you said, walking through the cellar with a candle and a beret on or whatever you said, or even just as simple as, just walking through the vineyard and all the things that I love to do with winemaking is 20% of my job, and I think that's true, whether it's your daughter or, whatever we might do. Whereas someone who I think goes into, law or accounting or things like that, kind of is they've prepared themselves that is what you are doing spreadsheets. That's your deal. When it's on the artistic side, it's a little bit different. And also just the nature of, like, you doing philosophy, Andrew, and that's very much a part of your core. You are philosophical and whatever else. So when it comes to being grounded into shit, this is what we have to do today. Yeah. I don't want to do that. That's, no thanks.
I never accepted it well. It wasn't part of the dream. It wasn't part of it wasn't part of the story. But, Mike, maybe what you're experiencing with your daughter is just you try to tell a 20-year-old to stay open and stay curious and be realistic. I mean, that's like, that can be like telling a puppy not to piss on the carpet. You can do it. You can try to do it, but and maybe like you said, I think there's truth to it. I think that discomfort is a necessary part of the path, and it's
absolutely.
God, you wish to hell it wasn't when you're in it. And
truth.
But you have to live it to know it. Kind of like what you're saying, Mike, is like it doesn't matter what you know. You got to let your daughter experience that on her own. There's no way you can just tell someone that. They have to experience it on their own.
I don't have. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
No, that was it. Completely embrace the suck.
Yeah,
right.
You have to embrace the suck.
That's hard learn. It takes a lot of, a lot of years. Like, I think the part where it's young, you don't know what's coming because you only have so much experience. The part that's hard when you get older is now, again, all this is kind of cliche because you're older and now and maybe you wish you had the time machine to go back. And with what you do know, now you could go back with that energy and vigor and younger body and all those type of things to go. But it's still, that doesn't even make sense because it wouldn't be those two. You can't do that. So it's it's just this fucking impossible thing for you to even. You try to not even linger in any of that space to be what if, because fuck, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant.
As hard as it can be for us to go through. See, I don't have kids. They wouldn't let me. Most people don't know you can get a restraining order on having kids. So I don't fit the bill. But as hard as it can be for us, I can only imagine what it might be like for a parent to see their kid have some of these moments in life. I just can't imagine because I mean, you kind of want to come to their defense, I would imagine, but at the same time, speaking to your wisdom, Mike, you got to let them go through it.
You got to let them go through
exactly
it. You can't.
Right.
I mean,
God,
it would be
hard.
selfish not to.
Yes.
To not let them do it on their own. That's the life experience, right? I mean, that's the and once you go through it, you realize the beauty in that, and you can go, well, hopefully, you can go, now I see, now I know what my dad was telling me to do, but yeah, you got to let it flow through, and that's completely good. And so then going back to it, Andrew, that's basically what you experienced. You realized, and
Well, when I said that things at Skipstone, and it wasn't just Skipstone, I mean that began to fall apart. But the whole wine thing began to fall apart, and that's why I wanted to interject the thing about identity, because more and more and more I was finding that the identity that I created for myself, that I crammed myself into, didn't fit the reality of the industry. And I've always been very stubborn about my romances, and I didn't accept that. I couldn't accept that. And I needed to, and I needed to grow, but I didn't. I fought against it. I swam upstream, and you break things. You break shit when you do that. And I broke shit. Shit broke around me too. I could get into the details of, consulting winemakers, you sons of bitches. But I won't. It just, I had this dream thing. I had this magnetism to this place, and I started to lose it. And that was both my doing and both an owner's doing, because I wasn't famous enough. And how do you get famous unless you have opportunities? And in any case, the job ended, and it didn't end well. And so I jumped ship and went to Bordeaux for a year. I got out of Dodge, and the idea was sabbatical. The idea was to let things, we always think that we break things beyond repair, when in fact outside of us nobody's even paying attention.
Truth.
Yeah, no, you're laughing, but that's absolutely true. Isn't it for every element of life? What we think about that's so dramatic and so important, no one else gives two shits about.
Completely.
It's really not, we're not that important.
I could have stayed in California, gotten another job as winemaker, and just carried on.
Yeah, 100%. It happens literally every day.
But I didn't take it well. And so I needed to get out of town, and I got way out of town. And, the idea, like I said, was sabbatical. The idea was to, and it was also something I'd always wanted to do. I mean, go to France. Sure. I get there, and in the little house I lived in, the Petite Maison, La Maison Petite, I look out my window and I'm looking at the vineyards of Cheval Blanc.
Okay.
I mean, this is fucking, it's hallowed ground. This is.
See, this is the earnesty, Mike, that I was earnestness that I was talking about. This is my impersonation of Andrew. Come on, Robbie, it's Cheval Blanc. It's hallowed ground.
So for me to clarify, Andrew, you're in the business in California.
Yeah.
And you just kind of encapsulated this you're working, you think you're in your dream job. A lot of things, well, again, for any of us, be the dream job. We started talking in our pre-show talking about the football draft is coming out, and many guys are going into their dream job. That's not going to be their dream job. Many of us do that.
Do I need to say go Chiefs? Can I just say go Chiefs?
I don't almost.
Listen, I'm going to have to talk about Niners fans here a little bit. I'm not going to do it now.
Falcons fan.
I'm not going to do it now, but before this podcast is over, I got something to say about Niners fans.
So you're there in California. You quickly got to that. Okay, for a lot of us, you have this shit. Some people call it whatever, the crisis, this life, whatever. This, it's time to change, shift, whatever you want to call it. What is the deal? What is it that you do that you go, I'm going to do this, that lands you into Bordeaux? What is it that you open up a book and search, I'm going there to do what? What is it that you go there to
you've
do?
Always wanted, right?
Yeah, it was equal parts get out of Dodge, run.
Yeah. Yep.
And it was very, very much equal parts go to the homeland.
Okay.
Go to one analogy I've always used.
Israel?
Well, that too. One of the analogies.
Closer.
Yeah, closer. Yeah, exactly. Closer, a little less security to get through.
Yeah. Right.
But I'm in the club, so that wouldn't have been a problem. Anyway, but the analogy that I use is if you go into theology, if you want to be a clergy member, at some point you got to go to the Vatican or you got to go to Israel. Well, that's what going to Bordeaux was for me. I became a Bordelais winemaker. I mean, all winemakers, I think, end up making the kind of wines they love to drink. And so I always loved Cabernet and think it's king and loved those varietals. And so it was always going to be Bordeaux. And so it was very much so equal parts that. And, getting over there was spine tingling for the entirety of the time I was there. Now that was a situation where I had expectations and had a dream and it lived straight the fuck up to it. I mean, it's remarkable how satisfying that experience was. And, it satisfied me on so many levels. Let me just throw out a couple things. I worked with a very famous winemaker, Hubert Dubois, Monsieur Dubois to me. He's the, 7th or 8th generation owner of Chateau Angelus, maybe the greatest Merlot house in the world.
Okay.
I worked at a Grand Cru Classé in Saint-Emilion. I was on the right bank the whole time. Like I said, living just across the street from Cheval Blanc. At one point, I was there for the 2010 vintage, and we don't get to choose our vintages, but that's one of the all-time classic Bordeaux vintages. I just got lucky. And I said to Monsieur Dubois at one point, I know this is good. Like, this is good fruit. Like, this is going to be good. Like, how good is it? And he said, well, I don't know. And he comes back to me in a couple days, and he says, well, I was looking through the family journals. This is looking a lot like 1831.
Wow.
That's
nice. And I'm like, California's not even a state.
No.
Yeah.
Tell me about 1976.
Yeah, exactly. And so it had that kind of gravitas to it, this whole experience. And I worked in a generations old, hundreds-year-old winery, and it was just so unbelievably deep and fulfilling. And because the industry is so old there, if you're a winemaker, you might as well be a plumber.
Yeah. It's just a normal job.
It's a normal job. There is no fanfare. I used to ride my bike to work sometimes, and I would ride past Chateau Petrus. And like the first couple times I did it, I stopped on my bike. And like, I remember one of those days that I had stopped and just like looked at it, like, wanting to masturbate because it was Chateau Petrus. These schoolgirls ride by me like there's something wrong with me.
That wouldn't have been good.
No, that probably wouldn't have been good. I might have lost that job too.
That doesn't make the magazines.
So, the idea that this was going to be sabbatical and I was going to come back refreshed and renewed, in a sense, it worked against me because I came back and California was as exposed as ever. And
what do you mean by that?
Robbie, I'm going to say some things you might not like.
No, I fully invite it.
Where the French industry is old and sophisticated and mature and comfortable with itself. The California industry is arrogant and nouveau riche.
That's true. Why would that upset me? Those are accurate statements.
Because I still think it's true, Mike. Well, no, so that was so exposed, and it just before at that point I hadn't left yet. I hadn't left California. I hadn't left the industry, but in retrospect, and even at the time, I knew it was over. It was over. I had the old world experience. I had the nouveau riche, arrogant, fuck you, motherfucker owners of wineries experience. I don't feel that way as much anymore. I don't. I was not nearly as mature as I needed to be. I wasn't well in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
But I took my trip down to Santa Barbara for a couple years, and I'm just going to be honest. My mental health deteriorated, and after a year and a half, I had a bit of a breakdown and packed it in and moved back home to Kansas City, and I've been there ever since.
But I think that kind of like we were saying, that the kind of coming of age, not coming of age, but realization of when we have these dreams or preconceived ideas, and when it's not fulfilling, it can certainly drive that. That can promote these these feelings and perceptions. When you realize that what reality is, that can be a huge, monumental letdown. And that, I think that experience happens to quite a lot of us. I mean, the other folks out there who that doesn't happen to, that's really the exception. The normalcy, I think, is experiencing what you experience.
I suppose so. I would hope that the depths of my experience, at the bottom of my experience, wouldn't be common.
Sure.
On behalf of people's well-being.
Hey, friends. What are you doing this weekend? You doing something fun? You having people over for dinner? You want to have a delicious dinner and friends over? You want to impress somebody. Okay, if you want to impress somebody, don't go to the grocery store and get that wine. That one over there that you had, last dinner party. Oh, yeah, they like that. That's fine. That's probably a pretty good one. That one is, too. That's a good wine. You know what you want to do? This time you want to impress them. You want to impress them with something super awesome. You know what you want to do? Get a bottle of Pearson Meyer wine. That's what you want. You want to impress them. How about it's just you? It's you. You live your life to the fullest and you're like, hey, look, I deserve something great every now and then, right? Guess what you want? Pearson Meyer wine. Duh. It's a no-brainer. Pearson Meyer wine. It's a very, very good wine.
What to me is super exciting is what you've been doing in the more recent past, which is, what are you doing now, Andrew?
We can cut right to it. I've been back in Kansas City for 12 years. 10 years of it was in the professional and personal wilderness. I stayed in wine in different fashions, distribution, even retail, because you go downhill, you do what you know. And I don't know, I guess about a year ago or so, I finally made a decision that I was going to leave wine altogether.
Okay.
I was going to leave it. I was going to leave it professionally. I was going to leave it. And what I left was that identity that we talked about. I walked out of that identity for the first time since I was 22 years old.
Okay.
I had to feel pretty raw.
Question for you, Andrew.
Yep.
Why? Why are you you're going to make the statement, I'm going to leave this. I'm not doing this shit anymore. This is partially who I am. I mean, I think it's somewhat of a deep question, right? To go, I'm not going to do this. Why is that?
It was a long time coming. At the same time, it was like a death in the family. You can see it coming, but when it happens, it's still shocking.
It's a powerful thing, too. It takes a lot of energy to turn the Titanic. Or not to turn the Titanic, to turn the battleship, whatever the case may be.
Well, okay, why? I was exhausted. I was,
not happy.
I was not happy. It's like I had one foot outside of that identity, dragging myself along for years. And the identity just became too burdensome. It became too...
Gotcha.
It just became overwhelming. I had to leave it. I had to... Camus talks about philosophical suicide. It's not true suicide. You don't kill yourself. But I think having had that experience, I think I know what he was talking about. I think I committed philosophical suicide. I think in leaving that identity, because listen, why? Because if I carried that motherfucker for another day, then it might have been a different kind of suicide. I mean,
Sure.
it became so ill-fitting. It became so burdensome. It became so filled with malice
And not fulfilling.
and not fulfilling. And I wasn't living anymore. And so it was, I mean, in some ways it was a very long time coming decision. And in some ways, it wasn't a decision in the sense that I had no other choice.
Sure.
I had to do this, or my persistence in life was coming to question, I guess. So I stepped out of it. And
You looked around. We talked about it like multiple times. Like, what is fulfilling? We can both agree that the whole wine industry, the wine concept at large, there was no fulfillment, no gratification there, and we had many conversations about so what would be fulfilling, and not just being a philosophical person. You're also, like I said, a very earnest person, but you're a very caring person. And I think that's what you started to explore. Those are the things we talked about, and you had talked to me about various organizations that all sounded great. That you talked about, if I may, like working with autism and autistic people, and just general social work and care and community service and things like that, and that's a wonderful thing. And those people who are committed to doing that, I love that, and I think that's wonderful. But I was even questioning, like, would that really be fulfilling for you? Because you still have your creative spirit, you still have your artistic spirit. We've talked a lot about wine, but one of the things that you and I share, with, like, when we live together, that you're very passionate about music, very knowledgeable about music, and something very important to you. And so through your exploring different opportunities to work in kind of social service, nonprofit world, you were able to find.
well, can I take a step back?
Yeah,
just
please.
for a couple
Absolutely.
minutes? The idea of being of service was nothing new. It had been bubbling inside of me for a very long time. When I first moved back to Kansas City, I took a few months off because I had been through kind of the ringer emotionally. And my mom said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Maybe I want to try to help people." So that was 10 years before I actually made a move to do so. So it's nothing new in me. It's been around there. When I left wine finally and stepped out of that identity, even then I knew that in terms of work, I was going to do something along those lines. But this is what I wanted to take a step back on. I took 6 months off between stepping away from wine and finding the job that I have now, which I'm going to get to in just a second. But let me just say that in that 6 months, I did identity the right way.
Describe that.
Identity isn't something you construct. It's not something you build. It's something that bubbles to the surface.
It's innate?
Well, it is innate. Identity is more a voyage of discovery than it is any act of construction. You find identity. You don't make it. And in that 6 months, I turned to curiosity. And I didn't make any decisions for myself or who I was or what I was going to be. I just started to listen to myself. And it just started to bubble up. And my true identity came to light. One that I didn't step into, but one that I have become because it's become me. You don't, and again, try to say this to a 21-year-old. You don't build your identity. You find your identity.
Yes.
And in the 6 months I took off between leaving wine and taking the job at Band of Angels was that process. And it was one of the most, if not the most, remarkable, beautiful, revelatory experiences of my life.
And I can second that emotion because I got to witness this in real time. Like I said, you're one of my oldest and dearest friends. No offense, Mike Anderson, but you know, I've watched you, admired you for so long, and seen struggles and this, that, and the other, and disappointments, and to see you the strength and courage to make that change, and then to find something and to move into it was incredibly beautiful and powerful, and it's amazing to watch. So yeah, thank you for letting me witness that.
It's been a remarkable year because I am and this has been on my mind, kind of celebrating an anniversary of sorts. It was a year and a month ago now that I left wine and started this whole process. And so once my identity started to come to me and I started to get some mojo back and started to feel like myself for the first time, and started to feel empowered, I began to turn my sights on work again and towards service, towards serving. And like Robbie said, this is the other beauty of that 6 months off. It morphed and changed. And I got to, as my identity was coming to me, I got to try things on and investigate. And, it kind of went through, what I was calling social services, which was basically, social work. And I was there for a couple months. And, there's a reality there too. I would have had to go back to school. I don't want to go back to school, man. I'm in my 50s now. There's pretty cute girls at school.
There's opportunities.
You still go back to school.
I could have still gone back to school.
You'd be like Rodney Dangerfield.
It wasn't the right thing for me. And so it began to morph and change and continue to change. And then I began to think about something that I had always felt a lack in, kind of my whole life. And that's the notion of community. Community is really important. It's important in and of itself, but it's important for us as human beings to feel community and to have community. And that can mean many different things. And it, is something that had always been lacking in my life, I think because I was untrue to myself for so long. But also because that's what I wanted to serve. So it became community service away from social service or the service of one individual. It became community service, wanting to serve community.
That's an interesting distinction. Yeah.
And then I hit a fork in the road where I was like, okay, the other thing about me is I love, and I mean love, the arts.
And this is very true.
I love the arts. I love musical arts. I love the visual arts. I love reading. I love the arts in any form. So I was like, I could either do something in community service, a nonprofit, or I could go into the arts, which in my way of thinking is community service.
Yeah.
And, any arts.
Community contribution.
Sure.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that almost all museums, orchestras, these are nonprofits. Those are nonprofits. So I knew I was headed towards the nonprofit world. And so then, and life does this sometimes, and I was fertile ground, equipped with a new sense of identity. And just as I made that turn, and I'm like, it could either be the arts, or it could be community service. An opportunity presented myself that was a seamless integration of both.
There you have it.
It was community service utilizing the arts. And I found Band of Angels.
Yeah.
And I went from seeing the one ad to thinking, wow, this could be pretty cool, to having a phone interview and immediately going into, I will not get this job. Mm-hmm.
And when you told me about it, I was like, and of course, I don't want to overinflate or whatever, get you too excited about something that you maybe it doesn't work out or whatever. But when you described it, I was like, that is the dead perfect thing for you.
Let's talk about that. What is
Band of Angels?
Describe Band of Angels.
Band of Angels is a Kansas City-based nonprofit charity. Mm-hmm. And we commune with community, kind of a funny way to put it. We interface with community on both ends of what we do. From the community at large, we gather and are donated musical instruments that we refurbish to as new as possible. And we get it back to the community in the hands of young people, middle schoolers and high schoolers, whose families can't afford musical instruments of their own.
Fantastic.
And even a beginner instrument costs hundreds of dollars.
Yeah.
We specialize in band and orchestra instruments because those are the instruments that are used in school programs.
Yes. And usually because some of the most expensive and hard to acquire instruments.
If you look at something like a saxophone with all of its valves and all of its metal pieces, even a beginner, quote unquote, cheap saxophone costs hundreds of dollars.
Yeah.
The origin of Band of Angels, the origin story is I work for a great guy, Mike Meyer.
Not to be confused with SNL Mike Myers.
Not to be confused with SNL Mike Myers or Robbie T. Meyer.
He's not my brother.
Yeah.
But Mike Meyer is affiliated with Meyer Music in Kansas City, which owns 3 locations, and they are the go-to source for school music programs. If you're a school, a middle school or a high school, and you're a big one and you have your own cachet of instruments, you go to Meyer Music for their refurbishing. You go to Meyer Music for their sheet music. You go there for any need you have. You send your kids there to go rent instruments. You send your kids there to go buy instruments. Servicing schools is probably, 75 or 80% of Meyer Music's business. Meyer Music is a very for-profit business. Mm-hmm. Band of Angels, which came out of Meyer Music, is a nonprofit. And the origin of it was Mike Myers, like he does I always say Myers, it's Meyer.
Yeah.
Mike Meyer.
Me, myself included.
Yes. He goes to schools every fall to get to do his part in getting kids involved in music. And so he'll sit at a table with the music director of the school, and the parents and the kids come sit down and say, I'd like to be in a school music program. And the music director says, okay, you want to be in band or orchestra? What's the right fit? And the conversation commences. And inevitably, the conversation will come to Mike Meyer. And the question was, well, how much can you afford to rent an instrument or buy an instrument? And for a percentage of kids, a higher percentage in certain schools in certain parts of the city, that was the end of the conversation.
Yeah,
sure.
Because the kid's head would drop. And the answer was, we can't afford to even rent an instrument. We just don't have the money. And you had a crushed kid. You had embarrassed parents. You had a frustrated music director. And in the words of Mike Meyer, you had the greedy capitalist.
Correct.
And he had this vision, that I could collect music instruments, refurbish them at Meyer Music. Band of Angels could pay Meyer Music to do this. And instead of it being the end of the conversation, if a kid said we can't afford it, the answer became no problem. Here's your instrument.
Right.
Go get them, kid.
Yes. Yeah.
And in the very first year, the the goal was to collect 50 instruments from the community at large and refurbish, maybe half those, because not all the instruments were still serviceable. And maybe donate to 25 kids in the Kansas City metro area. Well, with a goal of getting 50 that first year, Mike got 300.
Yeah.
So it immediately touched a nerve. Cut to 14 years later to today, in 2023, we collected.
It's 2024.
I know, but
sorry.
But in 2023, last year, we collected over 1,200 instruments from the Kansas City community. We gave instruments to almost 500 kids. We now have become sort of a full-service nonprofit for music programs, and we not only give out instruments, but we give out scholarships to summer music camps, college scholarships, one-off scholarships. We just sent a kid to play at Carnegie Hall.
And there's just like unlimited opportunities for growth of this, not just in the Kansas City area, but outside of that, what you can offer these kids. And it's the same thing in communities everywhere, where it's not just purchasing the instrument as a musician. No, it's not even just acquiring an instrument. Oh, now there's lessons. Now there's taking care of that instrument. Now there's this, that, and the other, going to camps. And it's very expensive to practice the art, the very fulfilling, nurturing art, the community giving art of music. And what Band of Angels is doing is profound.
We're there for all of those steps. We provide all of those steps now. It's our main pad, our wheelhouse will always be collecting instruments and donating instruments. That's where it starts for a kid. You got to have your own instrument. If you don't, you can use the schools, but there's limitations. You share it with another kid. You can't take it home. You can't practice. Not to even mention the importance of personal ownership.
Pride.
Correct.
And, I know how things are. And, a kid is going to really love the part of the instrument we give them, the parts that are perfect. But in a way, they're going to love even the more imperfect parts better, because that's what makes it theirs.
Absolutely.
My trumpet's the one with the blemish here. Mine has the little dent there. That's what makes it mine.
Yes.
And it's a personal relationship. Talk to any musician. It's a personal relationship, and it's good for the instrument too. It brings the instrument alive. Have you ever heard someone in popular music say, the first time I played that guitar, I knew there were songs in that guitar?
Yeah.
That speaks to the soul of the instrument. And so we are introducing a student and an instrument to each other. And it's a relationship. And I think it's the truest, most honest relationship probably in that kid's life. And it allows that kid to communicate and to express themselves in a way that one just can't outside of making music.
And so,
and the joy, the payback from that joy. By the way, Andrew, as you've been telling this story from it started even before you had the story of standing there with the old man, French winemaker in Bordeaux, that you said, wow, you're having almost this epiphany as the young guy. I think this is good. And even the way that you said he reacted, I don't know his version of that. To fast forward to you saying getting out for whatever these reasons, to you getting back to Kansas City, almost weirdly. And anymore, Andrew, I try not to use weirdly, like this is weirdly connected to everything that I see, because I'm feeling more and more that every single thing is connected. Like the fact that we are here right now together was already some type of fate. Let me tell you a little bit of something that happened. And because there's so many things, it would be overwhelming, and I would melt down in the somewhat insanity that I'm always living in as well. Let me just give you this. I'll tell you my own little personal anecdote to this, which I almost don't want to, because I don't want anything to be back to me, ego, but I think it relates to what you're talking about with the children. I, too, had a tough time with all these things we're talking about this last week. There's several things within creativity and art that I'm doing that I'm like, why isn't this better? And this should be more there should be more of a spotlight toward me, and look what I'm doing for this big client, and I'm not as quote unquote successful as I should be, and this and that, and all of these things, and wrapped up in my ego and all this. I'm just, fuck it, like you. Fuck it, I'm going to walk away from this. I have a meeting that I go, I'm going to walk away from this. I have written a children's book. A lot of time I'm trying to hustle it, like I'm hustling this children's book as if you're trying to hustle capitalistically wine to sell the fucking bottles of wine. You got to make money and this and that. I'm driving away from this going, yeah, that's right. I also got to do the goddamn book thing or whatever. And I'm driving home. I passed by an elementary school that I can hear those kids from my office window sitting where I am right now. I hear them every day at an Atlanta public school. Kids that can't pay for their lunch. They're across there. I can hear them every fucking day, right? I'm drive past it, and a light bulb went off. I circled back around and I pulled into the parking lot. I have some books in the back of my car. I get out. I'm walking up to the school. Oh God, what's this weird looking white guy walking up here for? Two, an AP person is sitting out front, and a teacher. They're about to let out for school. Hey, what are you doing? Hey, listen. I don't know why. I don't know why it never occurred to me, and I really don't know why. It did not occur to me until this moment that I said, I hear these kids every day. Listen, I wrote this book, right? Will you just have some? There's no like, I want to sell them to you. Nothing. I'm you in that moment, Andrew. Will you just have some? Just that's it. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to fucking any kind of other shit. Will you just have some? In that, like you said, about them owning their own instrument, the reaction that I got, you couldn't write me checks for 100 books.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
What I got in that moment, and they said, they smiled. I could almost get choked up right now talking about it. They said, hey, they was like, oh, they hugged me, and they said, would you mind coming back and reading to us?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, are you kidding me? I drive away. As I'm driving away, they're waving to me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is what life is. Well, not all these weird things that were in my head. I'm only sharing my story because I could feel it in everything that you were talking about, how you got from where you're going to where you are.
Well, and that's exactly right. Sorry, Andrew, to interrupt, and I don't want to overtalk, but it does circle back to that everything that we've talked about, preconceived ideas of a particular industry and whatever else. And you and I both talked about how preconceived ideas about what the wine industry is like. And then you kind of set yourself up for disappointment because it's not like that. You know, when you talked about doing service work, and then when you talked about Band of Angels, to me and here, there was nothing preconceived. And then there was also not a motivation, and it's not capitalism or whatever, but like this end result, these goalposts that you go to, you're serving. You're already nurtured in that way. And it's kind of like, I don't want to do that like cliche thing like was like rescuing a dog. I didn't rescue him, he rescued me, that bullshit. But sincerely, don't you feel like the work that you do now is so much more fulfilling to you? You get more out of it than you I don't want to say that more than you put in, but you get my point. It's very fulfilling to you.
I need to show you this, Robbie. About 2 weeks ago now, I did an instrument presentation. I presented a kid with their own instrument, and it was filmed. I got to show that to you, Robbie.
Yeah, please.
It's
we can actually put it on our deal too in the liner notes
if you choose to. What struck me was reading this young woman's application and what music meant to her. And just speaking from my heart to her, presenting her with this instrument, she was crying. I was trying not to. Her parents were crying.
Yeah.
I mean, my God, I never, it's a pretty cool feeling.
Like one of the best days of your life.
Probably. it's a pretty cool feeling when you see your first wine roll down the bottling line.
Sure.
That doesn't hold a candle.
Yeah.
That's not even in the same building as this kind of experience.
Yeah.
And, even in this job, I find myself in the weeds sometimes. I've got spreadsheets to look through on this job too, but having had that experience and being able to come back to that, and I'm happy to say that we're a small organization in terms of our numbers. We're only 3 full-time employees, a part-time employee, and Mike Meyer. So the distance between us and what we do is always paper thin. The kids are always right there. Yeah. And to have that experience and to knowingly change the course of a young person's life. I don't really have words to express the gratification that comes from that. It's some feelings you just can't talk about because you can't find the words. You don't know how to express it. It's a hard thing to do. It's like defining an emotion. You can come close, but
until you've experienced it, you don't know.
You don't know, and I didn't know. And Band of Angels is, I would say reborn, Robbie, but I would say born for the first time, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm a Band of Angels. We talk about the kids that we donate instruments to as recipients, but I'm a Band of Angels recipient too.
For real. Yeah. Yes.
What it has given to me, what it has done for me, the fulfillment that I get to be able to serve through this organization. I'm still learning my way. I'm still only 7 months into a nonprofit career now. It's very different from winemaking. In some ways, I feel it's the opposite.
Yeah, it's definitely the opposite. But there's a funny thing too, though. You have not given that up.
Oh, hell
which
no.
is like one of the things, Mike, that through Band of Angels has is it an auction? Would you just say, or a fundraiser every year? And they do different things with fundraising to support this, and we'll get into how to contact Band of Angels in a second. But they had an auction recently, and Andrew's he auctioned off. He had an item that's like a wine education class. And so we'll have some Pearson Meyer wine as part of Andrew's wine education. And what did that lot sell for?
$4,000.
$4,000 for an evening with Andrew Levi. So not only does he continue with his wine passion, wine education, sharing with others, but then he raised another $4,000 for Band of Angels, which is super cool. And then I'm also he brought it up. It wasn't me. I'm not pushing him, but he mentioned the idea of maybe toying around with a little wine distribution in the Kansas City area just to kind of scratch that itch of the love of wine. And I'm hoping he'll do that.
I think it'll happen. I've got conversations lined up when I get home with people who've done it.
Yeah. Well, we'll do that. Andrew, I'm trying not to, but we have to on the production level. I'm looking over at this clock and I can see I'm like at an hour and 15, but an amazing, beautiful story, a life story, and very interesting, passionate thing. I feel very fortunate to be able to witness you and to see everything that you have done. And I look forward so much to like what you're going to do next and want to be a part of that. Briefly, we'll put some stuff up on links, but how do people because I know it's Kansas City now, but I think Band of Angels maybe in over the future, I can see it at least from my perspective of expanding out now. How can people support? Is it bandofangels.com? I mean, how do they get in touch? How can they give you money?
Let me get a sip here.
A sip of Topo Chico, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of giving money,
God damn, that's Topo Chico.
See,
that's it. See what happens there.
Try this.
See.
Speaking of Band of Angels,
and also, by the way, Mike. Can you see I'm wearing a hat? I normally don't wear a hat. I got this hat the other day from Wico. This
Yeah?
is a company that's a they do.
Set me up. I thought you were going to say it's a hat from Topo Chico.
No, it's a hat from Wico. And
Okay,
Wico,
Wico.
they do optical sorters, they do wine processing equipment, food
Okay.
processing equipment, an amazing company. And it's one of
Yeah.
those things like, you know how like Carhartt has a style, they've created a brand, even though it's just like workman's clothes.
Yeah.
Wico, like even I don't know if that's an interesting name or not, but isn't this a good looking hat?
It is
It's
a
kind of
good-looking hat.
I
stylish.
was about to say, is there, I mean, their equipment, is this just like indicative of their equipment? Because that's a sharp looking
It's
hat.
a sharp looking hat. Their equipment is phenomenal. Even
Okay.
beyond their equipment, their service is phenomenal. And so
What?
I thought I would wear this hat and go, hey, come on, Wico, why don't you throw down a few dollars for Drop the Check podcast,
Oh my
Don't you think
gosh.
they should?
Oh, please. If
I'll run a
anyone,
promo.
like,
I'll post some of our sorting lines, whatever. But see,
I don't even feel like the same person.
after the
Haven't
Topo Chico,
sipped this.
so refresh.
So
you want to go
refresh.
another hour?
I feel like a new identity is coming on.
You
That's-
just
it's what
realized your
happens.
own identity.
It's bubbling to
Topo
the
Chico.
surface.
It's bubbling. See how many things we have to work with here. This is fantastic.
It's amazing.
So hold on. Get back to Band of Angels. How do we get in touch?
Bandofangels.org.
Okay.
Okay.
Bandofangels.org. There are 3 ways to donate to Band of Angels. You can donate instruments, which probably isn't practical if you don't live in the Kansas City area because they got to come to Meyer Music. Another way to donate is to donate your time via volunteering, which makes even less sense unless you live in the Kansas City area. But hopefully we'll have a chapter coming soon to your town.
Yeah.
That's the
Okay.
idea, because good ideas float, and Band of Angels is a good idea.
I want to start a Napa Valley chapter, and I personally, not like whatever, but I've given 2 instruments to our local high school. And
It only takes a couple $100,000 to start a chapter.
okay, so then therefore the third option
The third
is give
way,
money.
and this is, look, all nonprofits need this. The third way to donate is to donate money.
Yeah.
And, we have overhead. Of course we do. It costs money to refurbish instruments. It costs, our programs cost money. And we are in growth phase. We do have ISET, perhaps on expanding outside of Kansas City. We are in the advantageous position of having more instruments than we can find kids to donate to, and we scour the local earth, so we'll continue to. But all of this costs money, and we're very appreciative of those who will donate money because it's very direct. Of course, we have overhead. There's 3 of us full time. There's 1 part time. We all have to get paid. But like I said, we are not the United Way. This doesn't happen down the hall.
Yeah.
We're not on separate floors. We're all right on top of each other, intersecting with each other's jobs, and anybody's donation is going to be very directly impacting students. So, please and thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll do that through the website. We'll post that up. We'll also are there social media? Like, do you guys have Instagram and things?
We do
like
have
that?
social media. We're on the Instagram, the Facebook, and the LinkedIn. I like to call those the IG, the FB, and the LI.
Yep.
Okay. Well, the IG we'll post a link to. I'll drop the check for this podcast, and hopefully we'll send it to Band of Angels, and you guys can collaborate on that post so everyone can hear this. But yeah, please do that and reach out to it. I'm just personally excited for your personal life journey, for our relationship. It's so wonderful that I get to see that you are, thriving and doing this. It's wonderful. I greatly appreciate your time, for this podcast, but that now we get to hang out for a couple of days.
Unbelievable.
Mike just did this same sort of sabbatical, like how long ago? A few months ago, Mike, and he came for like several days, and we did a whole lot of nothing, but it was a whole lot of fun. That's what we're getting ready to do. So anyway, Brother Andrew, I love you so much. I'm so thankful that you're here and doing this for us. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing left to say other than, at the end of the dinner, when the time is done and the plates are cleared, it's got to be time to drop the check. So, Mike, do we have to drop the check?
Time to drop the check.
All right.
Hey, friends, thanks for joining us today. If you're interested in more information about Band of Angels or how you may be able to help, you can visit bandofangels.org or follow Band of Angels on social media platforms. As always, Drop the Check is brought to you by Pearson Meyer Wines. Pearson Meyer, a very, very good wine. For Drop the Check and Robbie Meyer, I'm Mike Anderson. See you next time.